Given his instructions to catch the train, Simon drives like a maniac, and he has a slightly crazy look on his face too, almost as if he is enjoying the danger and recklessness. The tires of the Austin 1800 screech and howl as he stretches the performance of the saloon car to its limits. Hammering down a narrow country lane, he whizzes past a white Rover P6 parked behind some bushes. The powerful police car takes chase and pursues the blue car. Simon's driving becomes faster and riskier. He sweeps around bends, barely holding the car on the road. The police car activates its siren and flashing blue lights. Simon spots the chasing car in his rearview mirror. "Oh no," he exclaims. Sarah looks back out of the rear window and clocks the cop car. "You and your bloody train," he says to her with annoyance. They come up to a single-lane part of the road where roadworks and lights are in operation. Simon jumps the lights, nearly has a head-on with a lorry, but just swerves by it, almost running a road worker over in the process. The cop car, following on behind, arrives too late to get around the lorry that Simon swerved by, and it now blocks the entire single lane. They come to a carriageway where roadworks and traffic lights are in operation. Simon jumps the lights, then almost has a head-on collision with a lorry, but just manages to swerve by it. However, he almost runs over a roadside worker in the process. The cop car following them arrives too late to get by the lorry that Simon narrowly avoiding hitting with his risky driving. The long vehicle is blocking the single-lane flow of traffic. Having broken free of his tail, Simon speeds along for another half-mile or so before performing an emergency stop. Blue smoke rises from the tarmac, and there is a deafening screeching sound coming from the tires on the tarmac. He crunches the car into reverse and accelerates backwards. Turning sharply into a muddy track, he experiences difficulty steering the car and keeping it gripped to the slippery surface. At times, the wheels spin without any forward movement being made. Finally, he stops under an old stone railway arch in an effort to keep out of sight. His ploy works. The chasing police car races by on the main road. It appears they may have escaped the cops completely. Simon lets out a sigh of relief. "Just hope they didn't get my number," he says. As they sit there in the car, Sarah looks at him directly. "You lied to me about that train." He starts to squirm. Her tone is serious. "Why?" she asks. He looks uncomfortable and struggles to answer her. Simon keeps his eyes straight ahead, not meeting hers. "I suppose that hotel of yours has some cozy double rooms." She emphasizes the word double. He looks slightly hurt. "No, it isn't like that." His tone is apologetic. I liked your company. It was a long way to drive and I didn't want to lose you." He sounds convincing. She hadn't expected this response. His softness and sincerity. Now she looks away. Sarah lights up a cigarette and takes a deep drag. "You were talking about your uncle," he prompts her. "Was I?" "Yeah." Sarah's face becomes melancholy and distant as her memory flashes back to her youth. "You said that after your parents died, you went to live with him at Strickham." In her flashback, Sarah sees herself as a young woman, dismounting a full-sized horse in the yard, while being greeted by her uncle, a tall man with straight black hair who looks to be in his late 40s. She smiles brightly at him. He gently smiles back at her, protectively, perhaps even possessively. As the young Sarah leads the horse into the stables, in her memory, the friendly look from her uncle turns to more of a mean and predatory one, now that she has her back to him. "I know this will sound crazy," she says to Simon with her mind back in the car, "but I suddenly had this yearning to visit Strickham, just to see where I used to live." He gently smiles at her, supportively. "How's the time?" she asks. "Oh, it must be about 2:30, he replies. "Don't you have a watch?" His eyebrows raise. "It's at the menders," he says. "I must remember to pick it up." He speaks in a hammy sort of way as if he doesn't really believe his own story. Simon and Sarah are driving along on the main road again. The weather is now drier and brighter. Sarah leans slightly towards him, showing an interest. "Where do you live?" she casually asks. "Birmingham," he replies, flatly. "Got a room there." She drags from her cigarette. "Not that I'm hardly ever there. Stay in hotels mostly," he says. Her face is curious. "Are you a traveler?" He pauses just for a second and then answers, "Yes." "Can't be much of a life?" "I've no complaints. I mean, everyone you meet's got some sort of problem, haven't they?" "Oh, what's yours?" she asks. Simon's thoughts start to drift to a memory of a trendy party in his past. He is with an attractive and slim girl. They have hooked up and decided to head for a bedroom. The girl looks classy and vivacious. "We'll be all right in here," the floozy says to the younger Simon, putting her arms around his shoulder and kissing him passionately. He still has a drink in his hand as they tightly embrace. "Lock the door just in case," she tells him. He dutifully obliges. The girl is not lacking in confidence. She pulls the zip down on her skirt with urgency. It drops to the floor. Simon is taken aback by her precociousness. He grasps her waist and they fall onto the bed. She kicks her heels off. "No, keep those on," he says. Simon then abruptly comes back to present-day reality. He is aware of the sound of Sarah's voice. "You need some petrol," she says. I said you need some petrol. We're almost out," Sarah informs him in a serious tone. Sure enough, the gauge shows the petrol tank to be near empty. Simon tuts a bit, as if it is not his fault. Soon they are entering a filling station. Simon parks in front of the pumps and cranks the handbrake on. He looks at her, as if to say, "Is this okay for you?" The petrol station is deserted, with no sign of anyone around. There are only 3 pumps, but the station itself has quite a few separate buildings around its forecourt. Simon impatiently sounds the horn to gain attention. He taps on the steering wheel with his fingers, waiting for a response. Simon is annoyed and impatient as he gets out of the car, leaving Sarah in the passenger seat. He walks over the forecourt and looks into a small kiosk. It's empty. He then heads over to a bigger building with a sliding door for vehicle access, situated at the back of the yard. The entry door at the side of this building is marked private. He knocks, but there is no response, and so he carries on wandering around. He passes a little scooter that is sitting on a stand next to a low wall. The sky is now turning gray, and the wind is picking up, blowing his fine hair about his face. He tucks his hands into his trouser pockets to keep them warm. As he steps around a huge puddle, Simon spots a small window, with a light on inside. He heads over and stands just a few feet away. The grimy window comprises of 6 square panels of tired and aged frosted glass. There is movement behind the glass. Someone is swishing about. He gets closer and peers through a small crack. His eyes widen. Looking back, over his shoulder, he checks that Sarah can't actually see him standing there and what he might be up to. Through the crack, there is a young woman with long black hair, standing in her underwear. She has taken off her skirt and blouse and is now only wearing a white bra and matching pants. It appears that this is a bathroom and changing room, and Simon is surreptitiously viewing an attractive lady getting dressed. The woman is casually putting on her uniform, totally unaware of his eager eyes watching her every move. As she buttons up the front of her blouse, her ample breasts push up out of the top of her bra. Simon gasps with arousal as the girl bends over to put on her shoes. Sarah has gotten out of the car and is walking around looking for Simon. She spots him across the forecourt, peering through the window crack. Simon snaps his head around and smiles. He walks towards Sarah with his hands in his pockets. "I can't seem to find anyone." He shakes his head for emphasis. A door opens behind him, and the lady he had been watching walks out onto the forecourt. "Oh, are you open?" he asks her in his best posh voice. "I'm always open, love," she replies, in a friendly manner. Her accent is working class. "What'd you want, petrol?" Yes, 5, please," he says with his jaw hanging open. She heads over to the pumps. He follows her. They immediately start flirting as they walk across the court. Meanwhile, Sarah is heading over to the door marked toilets, the one the busty woman has just come out of. Sarah walks in and closes the door behind her. The girl is now filling the Austin with petrol. She stands holding the pump, with her legs spread wide, crouching in a sexually provocative manner. Simon looks on approvingly. "Cor, ain't it cold, eh?" She gives him a wide smile. "I'm not surprised," he says. "You haven't got your buttons done up?" He speaks as if he is pretending to tell her off. Sarah appears again, walking around the corner of the building in the distance. She sees them at the pump, laughing and joking, and her face is stony. Sarah passes them and walks over to the Austin. Simon is paying the pump lady. He gives her a generous tip in cash and a big smile. "Cor, thanks," she says appreciatively. "Is there a telephone around here?" he asks her. "Just over there," she points. Sarah gets in the car. Simon heads for the phone. The pump girl walks back into the office and deposits the notes into the big cash register and pushes the tray shut. She then picks up a small circular vanity mirror, which is lying on top of the register, and begins to touch up her foundation. It's almost dark outside now, and someone is walking about in the forecourt. The office door is pushed slowly open. The pump girl is bending over the desk next to the register. She spins around, there is shock in her eyes. The girl lets out a blood-curdling scream, reaches out, and knocks the compact mirror off the register. It falls to the floor and rolls away. There follows an intense struggle and a lot of screaming. The woman's uniform is violently ripped from her body. She fights back at her attacker, but quickly falls to the floor. Simon comes back to the car to find Sarah dozing. He gets into the driver's seat. She wakes up. Sweeping his hair back casually, and with a smile, he says, "Sorry to be so long." He's slightly out of breath. Simon starts up the car, puts it into gear, and wastes no time in getting moving, driving away from the pumps, over the potholed forecourt, and onto the main road. They accelerate away at considerable speed. Simon has zeal in his eyes. Back at the garage, the pump girl is lying on the office floor, surrounded by sheets of A4 paper lying around her body. She has been strangled to death. "Did you get through on the phone, all right?" Sarah asks him. "After a bit, yeah," Simon replies as he races along. She brushes some dust away from his jacket. "I had to phone my boss to tell him I'll be in Highcliffe tomorrow." He gets agitated at her brushing his jacket, pushes her hand away, and flicks the dust off himself. "What do you sell?" she asks. "Have a guess," he says. "Vacuum cleaners?" He has a slight smile on his face. She thinks for a bit, then, encyclopedias, she tries. "I know," she says, very deliberately, "machinery and equipment." Simon looks at her directly, slightly perturbed. She smiles and then gets the envelope out from under the glove compartment. "I peeked," she says. "Who's Hartman?" He looks confused, and then he glances over at the envelope. "Oh, he's the chap that had the job before I took it on." Later, they stop at a cafe. Simon is standing at the cigarette machine. Having just gotten himself a packet of fags, he walks over to the counter and waits to be served. He seems relaxed. Someone cracks an egg and drops it into a large frying pan containing boiling fat about an inch deep. Sarah is already sitting down at a long canteen-type table eating breakfast. "2 more coffees, please," Simon says to the waiter. And then there is a deep, rumbling sound from outside. Simon looks out of the big front window. 2 bikers have just arrived and are parking their choppers and dismounting. Sarah screws her face up at the noise of the bike engines. The 2 bikers swagger in through the swing doors, and they take their helmets off. Immediately, they clock Sarah, sitting on her own. They walk over to her. They haven't noticed Simon yet. Sarah is uncomfortable, and she looks away, not acknowledging their presence. The younger biker, who has long, straggly black hair and a big biker jacket on, leans forward to get close to her. "Allo, darlin'," he says. "Keep these seats warm for us," he instructs her. And then the 2 bikers walk over to the counter, behaving as if they own the joint. The older biker has straggly light brown hair and is taller than Simon. The younger biker is shorter and just looks like a kid. The taller and older biker, who has a scruffy beard and mustache, comes up to the cafe counter. He stands, with his sidekick, right next to Simon. "A couple of Cokes," he demands. Simon drops some change on the floor. He bends down to pick it up. The young biker takes the opportunity to grab some sugar lumps and overload Simon's coffee reorders that are still sitting on the counter. The bikers think this is most amusing and giggle to each other. When Simon stands up, he notices what they have done. He gives them a stern look. They look away, acting all innocent, with silly smirks on their faces. With a plastic white spoon, Simon scoops the excess sugar out of the small white cups. He doesn't say anything. He then walks over to the table to join Sarah. She is daintily wiping her lips with a napkin. "Are these all right?" Simon hands over the fags as he stands above her. "Oh yeah, that's fine," she says with a smile. "Here, let me..." She offers to pay for the cigarettes. "No, really, it's all right." He waves away the payment gesture. "Oh," he says, "I forgot the matches. I'll go get some." Simon spins around quickly and takes a step right into the young biker. Simon knocks his polystyrene cup of Coke, spilling some of it. The young biker gives him a hostile look. Simon walks away. The two bikers now pace about. They don't take a seat.